Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, families of the hostages held by Hamas meet with President Biden. And delegates at the World Climate Summit have agreed on a long-term goal to give up fossil fuels that cause climate change.
Plus, we are tracking showers to return by Sunday. Your first alert forecast coming up as Mountain News at 5:30 starts now.
Dedicated to southern and eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. Several family members of Americans taken hostage by Hamas met with President Biden and Secretary of State Antony Blinken today to get an update on what's being done to secure their loved ones' release. CBS's Natalie Brand has more from the White House.
Family members of Americans taken hostage by Hamas who visited the White House Wednesday for a meeting with President Biden say they're praying for a holiday miracle.
We would love all of our loved ones to come back and be with us for Christmas.
Liz Naftali is the aunt of Abigail Adon, the 4-year-old Israeli American released last month.
Abigail is a miracle. She is a light in this very dark time.
The other families still waiting for answers say they're confident the administration is doing what it can, but decline to disclose details of the private meeting.
The U.S. administration is completely committed to getting the hostages out, the 8 Americans who remain there and the other nearly 130.
While the U.S. supports Israel's right to retaliate against Hamas for the October massacre, President Biden at a private fundraiser warned that Israel is losing international support because of what he called indiscriminate bombing.
But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told troops today that no amount of international pressure will stop them until there is victory over Hamas.
We came to Jerusalem to remind our government that there is no time left.
In Jerusalem, family members of the Israeli hostages formed a chain in front of Parliament, demanding action to bring their loved ones home. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
At the White House, family members of the hostages also praised lawmakers in Congress, saying they have received great support from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. The Gaza region is in shambles from the Israel-Gaza war. The United Nations General Assembly overwhelmingly voted in favor of demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza in a rebuke to the United States, which last week blocked a similar resolution in the smaller Security Council. In addition to the call to end the war between Israel and Hamas, the UN also wants all hostages to be released. Pope Francis is once again calling for a ceasefire in the war between Hamas and Israel. On Sunday, the Pope called for a halt in the unrest, saying more aid is needed in Gaza. This is the second time the Pope has spoken on the issue. Last month, he said the fighting was not a war, but rather terrorism. He made those comments after meeting with relatives of hostages taken by Hamas and families of Palestinians held in Israeli prisons. A federal judge says former President Donald Trump cannot claim presidential immunity in the civil defamation lawsuit against him. In an attempt to dismiss the case brought on by former magazine columnist E. Jean Carroll, Trump tried to claim presidential immunity. But the judge says he waived that defense by not raising it further in the legal proceedings. The appeals court also affirmed the lower court's ruling that rejected Trump's motion for summary judgment. An expert says Rudy Giuliani's defamation of 2 2020 election workers could cost up to $47 million. Ashley Humphreys of Northwestern University says that's to cover a campaign restoring their reputations. The case is on the damages phase after a judge ruled in favor of Georgia election workers Wandrea Shea Moss and Ruby Freeman. Humphrey says derogatory online posts about them got tens of millions of views and severely hurt their reputations. President Biden talked about the infrastructure projects happening around the country ahead of his meeting with his National Infrastructure Advisory Council. The president says the law will not only improve roads and bridges, but cybersecurity and electrical infrastructure. He says 40,000 projects are underway in more than 4,000 communities across the country.
It's about building better infrastructure, stronger infrastructure. infrastructure can withstand 21st century challenges from climate change to cyber attacks to natural disasters to foreign threats and so much more.
President Biden added the improvement projects not only lead to safer infrastructure, but give hope to those communities. The Supreme Court is wading into the abortion debate again. The justices are considering whether to restrict the abortion drug nationwide. The case concerns mifepristone, which, coupled with another drug, is one of the most common abortion methods in the United States. The scope of the Food and Drug Administration's authority is at the center of the dispute. The FDA ruled mifepristone is safe and effective more than 2 decades ago.
We are tracking a beautiful sunset on this Wednesday evening. Here's a live look overlooking I-64 over in Rowan County. Check out that awesome sunset back in the distance. And as the sun sets on this Wednesday, those temperatures continue to fall back in the 40s and a few lower 50s as well, down to 47 for Jackson, 52 for Harlan, and 52 also for Somerset and Wayne County in Monticello. So we are tracking some cooler conditions once again as we go into this evening. Up on first alert, pinpoint Doppler as high pressure is once again the big story on this Wednesday. We are tracking some more dry conditions, and that dry weather also lingers into your Thursday. Also on Friday, and more dry conditions to kick off the weekend, but we are giving you that first alert for that next rain chance by Sunday, also Monday, all thanks to an upper level low. Those details plus your full 7-day forecast coming up in just a few minutes. Steve?
Cameron, thank you. The father of the man charged in the 2022 July 4th parade mass shooting in suburban Chicago was released from jail today. Robert Cremo Jr. was sentenced to 60 days in jail last month as part of a deal in which he pleaded guilty to 7 misdemeanor counts of reckless conduct. Prosecutors said Cremo Jr. was criminally reckless when he signed his son's firearm owner's ID application nearly 3 years before the Highland Park massacre. Delegates at the World Climate Summit have agreed on a long-term goal to give up fossil fuels that cause climate change. It is the first time a mention of fossil fuels has appeared in an international climate agreement. CBS's Tina Kraus reports.
It is so decided.
Nearly 200 nations have approved a first-ever call for the world to transition away from planet-warming fossil fuels.
This is the fastest, simplest, easiest, quickest, cheapest way to be able to make the gains we need to make to reduce the threat to the planet.
Climate negotiators struck the deal in Dubai after 13 days of hard-fought talks in a country built on oil wealth. Scientists say emissions from oil, gas, and coal are the main driver of climate change. The U.S. is the second largest emitter after China.
This has the potential to be the beginning of a new era, the post-fossil era.
The agreement aims to triple the amount of renewable energy sources by 2030 while relying less on fossil fuels, substantially reduce methane emissions, another potent greenhouse gas this decade, and achieve net zero carbon emissions globally by mid-century.
This text is not enough.
Climate activists, along with many countries, including the U.S., argued for tougher language to completely phase out fossil fuels.
But we know this was a compromise between many parties.
Scientists say breaking away from fossil fuels is the last best hope to stave off a climate catastrophe. Tina Kraus, CBS News, London.
The climate deal is a non-binding agreement that comes as global temperatures hit an all-time high. European researchers declared 2023 the hottest year ever recorded on Earth. Regulators in Washington want to make it easier for you to switch television providers. The Federal Communications Commission is proposing new restrictions on fees imposed on subscribers who want to change service providers. The proposal would also allow partial refunds for subscribers who cancel mid-month. It is part of President Biden's executive order from 2021 that directs the federal government to find ways to boost competition. Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, it's the time of year opportunity thieves like to run away with packages on your front porch. Tips to prevent pesky porch pirates from stealing your presents.
Plus, high pressure will bring some more dry weather for the second half of the work week. Those details coming up after this break.